Democracy means power vested in the people, government by the people, for the people. In theory, we elect officials, MPs, senators and congresspeople to represent us, to pass laws and protect our legal rights. And the legal system, its purpose is to maintain order, interpret laws enacted by elected officials, uphold fairness and guarantee due process. The principle is that no individual can be deprived of their life, their liberty or property without following established legal principles. Due process is the safeguard against arbitrary detention or decisions, corruption and abuse of power. But what happens when truth becomes a threat and the system silences those who speak up, when dissent is brushed off as just mere noise? Right now across the UK and especially in the US, the right to be heard is under pressure and people are being coerced into silence. Today we're exploring the erosion of democracy within our legal framework, the way it has been gradually undermined and how those who raise their voices in defence of freedom and dissent often face a backlash from the very system meant to uphold these principles. Because when due process is ignored or twisted in some way, wrongful convictions happen. Innocent people are accused, prosecuted, and even imprisoned unjustly. And that not only undermines the justice system, but also the core values of democracy. No one person is above the law, including those who supervise the application of the law. In this video, I'm going to explore 3 compelling examples where democracy and justice fell short. The first 2 cases are in the UK, Jason Moore and Lucy Letby, both of whom are miscarriages of justice. And then the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Salvadorian citizen who was wrongfully deported from the US due to an administrative error, despite having legal status. But first, let's make a start on the Moore case in the UK. Jason Moore was convicted in 2013 for the murder of Robert Darby, who was killed outside a pub in London in 2005. Many questions have been raised about the safety of Moore's conviction. First, there was the eyewitness account. The photo ID lineup used to identify Moore displayed only his head and shoulders, which obscured his 6'5" soaring height. And that was a critical detail that contradicted the original description provided by an eyewitness who thought the attacker was slightly shorter. The identification method faced severe criticism for being suggestive and unreliable, making it unsuitable for cases where a person's innocence hangs in the balance. This witness later identified to being drunk at the time of the incident, casting further doubt on the reliability of the eyewitness account. This and many other aspects of the Moore case were not adequately addressed during the first trial. Even Robert Darby's brother, the victim's own family, has spoken out. He said that keeping Jason behind bars dishonours his brother's memory and lets the real killer walk free. And it gets worse. The Criminal Cases Review Commission, the body responsible for investigating likely wrongful convictions, is dealing with a huge backlog. That delay is stopping cases like Jason Moore's from being properly reviewed, and on top of that, the Lucy Letby case is also with the Commission. The Letby case is expected to greatly increase the Commission's workload due to the complexity of the evidence. Additionally, the public interest and scrutiny surrounding the Letby case may place added pressure on the Commission to prioritise it, potentially diverting resources from other cases such as the Jason Moore case. But the real issue runs much deeper than this. A systemic lack of rigorous evidence standards and repeated failures to address known flaws has created a justice system vulnerable to error, resistant to accountability, and dangerously prone to convicting the innocent. Despite repeated calls to review his conviction, Jason Moore remains in jail, silenced but not forgotten. If due process can fail in such clear-cut ways, what does it say about the strength of our legal system? Let me know in the comments section below. I would love to hear your perspective. I'll be dedicating a full video in the future to Jason's case. Now let's talk about another case that's divided public opinion in the UK, the Lucy Letby case. Lucy Letby, a neonatal nurse, was convicted in 2023 of multiple infant murders and attempted murders. She's currently in prison awaiting a review from the Criminal Cases Review Commission. But behind the headlines lies a growing debate. Was she guilty, or did she become a scapegoat for systemic failures within the healthcare system? Medical experts have raised several red flags that cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative. Letby's conviction was based entirely on circumstantial evidence. No direct forensic or eyewitness evidence ever linked her to any act of harm. And this raises the question, how could so many murders happen even without one single direct observation in what was a busy neonatal unit? Like Jason Moore, there was no forensic evidence or eyewitness testimony directly linking Lucy Letby to the crimes she has been convicted of. And there were alternate medical explanations for the deaths of the babies. As Dr. Shu Lee stated, in all cases, death or injury were deemed to be natural causes or just bad medical care. Further, the lead prosecution expert developed and promoted the central theory of harm while also advising the police and then going on to give expert testimony in court. And this raises serious concerns about his objectivity. And here's something else that most people are not aware of. In 2016, Letby filed a grievance after being removed from clinical duties. An internal review upheld her complaint, determining the accusations made against her by senior consultants lacked merit. Yet, just a few years later, she was put on trial for murder. Now, anyone who dares to question the Letby verdict is met with rebuke. But we have an appeal system for a reason, because sometimes the justice system just gets it wrong. Appeals are not just something for the guilty to try their luck with. They serve as a crucial safeguard within a democratic system. They allow for cases to be reviewed fairly and without bias, and are meant to uphold the rights of everyone involved, including the defendant, the victim, and society at large. Democracy only works when power is held accountable, when we acknowledge mistakes and correct them. But too often, it feels like the system is more focused on protecting its image than pursuing the truth. And this is a warning we cannot afford to ignore, because silencing doesn't stop at the UK. Across the Atlantic, the United States is facing its own crisis of due process. Kilmar Abrego Garcia fled El Salvador as a teenager to escape gang violence. His mother, who sold pupusas, was extorted and threatened by gangs, demanding her children to join them. To protect him, his mother sent him to the United States. In 2019, a US immigration judge granted Abrego Garcia a withholding of removal status, legally recognising that deporting him would expose him to danger. He had no criminal convictions and he had never broken the law in the US. Yet, in 2025, Garcia was mistakenly deported due to an administrative error. He was detained without trial in one of El Salvador's most notorious prisons. The US Supreme Court later ruled that the deportation was unlawful, but the Salvadorian government has refused to repatriate him. Meanwhile, the US administration claims it lacks the authority to enforce the court's ruling abroad. Abrego Garcia's case reflects a broader pattern of due process failures, where court orders are ignored, administrative shortcuts override legal protections, and flawed identification procedures are used to justify life-altering decisions. Both Abrego Garcia and Jason Moore were victims of suggestive ID practices. In Abrego Garcia's case, tattoos were wrongly interpreted as gang affiliations, and in the Moore case, a witness initially failed to identify him, but later, under biased conditions that obscured his distinctive height, identified him as the perpetrator. the Lucy Letby, Jason Moore and the Abrego Garcia cases have all shared patterns of due process failures. First, justice is undermined when convictions are based on weak or circumstantial evidence rather than solid, reliable proof. In the Letby case, there are allegations that the prosecution's theory of Letby as a murderer was formed early on and influenced by the interpretation of evidence, potentially leading to a confirmation bias. Regarding Jason Moore, there was no forensic evidence linking him to the crime. The murder weapon, a utility knife, was found to belong to another individual by the name of Martin Pear, who was later acquitted of all charges. And the Abrego Garcia deportation was based on the identification of tattoos, but there was no corroborating evidence of wrongdoing. When procedural errors occur, they compromise the fairness and accuracy of the judicial process. In the Letby case, expert testimony lacked solid peer review, and alternate medical theories of death were not presented at court. In the case of Jason Moore, the photo ID parade used to identify Moore only showed his head and shoulders, masking his distinctive height. Moreover, the key witness has since claimed he was intoxicated. Abrego Garcia's deportation simply ignored judicial rulings, granting him protection, representing a direct violation of established legal procedures. When legal and human rights are violated, it undermines the principles of justice and equity, often resulting in profound harm to individuals and communities. Following her conviction, Letby cited procedural errors and expert testimony issues in her appeal. The judge dismissed them for a lack of merit, but the appeal court further rejected any attempts to have her conviction overturned. Jason Moore's appeal was rejected by the Criminal Case Review Commission early on, despite new evidence showing the star witness admitted to being drunk and unsure about identifying him as the perpetrator. Abrego Garcia continues to face procedural hurdles even after his deportation was deemed illegal by the US Supreme Court. He remains incarcerated in El Salvador with little prospect of being returned to the US anytime soon. Abrego Garcia's wrongful deportation, Lucy Letby's blocked appeals, and the continual dismissal of Jason Moore's case all point to something deeply troubling, an institutional refusal to confront their mistakes. When due process fails, the consequence extends far beyond individual cases. It undermines public confidence, enabling injustices and eroding the very foundation of our democracy. Democracy just doesn't depend on elections. It relies on fairness, transparency and accountable legal systems. When we ignore systemic failures, silence those who speak out, or allow flawed procedures to go unchallenged, we pave the way for arbitrary power, the very force democracy was meant to resist. As Václav Havel, the former president of the Czech Republic, said, real resistance begins with simple acts of truth. He believed that even quiet refusals to accept lies can spark real change, because truth, courage and integrity have a ripple effect of their own. The patterns exposed in these cases are not just irregularities. They're the symptoms of a much deeper crisis, and one that demands more outrage. It demands action. If we want justice, we have to fight for it. If we value democracy, we have to defend it, not just with our words, but with our vigilance, courage and an unwavering commitment to the truth. That's our responsibility. If you found this breakdown valuable, be sure to like, share and subscribe for more investigations into the crossroads of law, justice and democracy. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. For now, take care.